All right. I love panels that have actual farmers on them to bring all their expertise forward. So this is going to be great. I just wanted to say that this work is funded in part by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada through Climate and Agri-Solutions Fund. And I know you've already got a survey on your chair. There's a second survey on your chair as well. And if you could fill that out, that really helps us know that that what we're delivering is useful, and it helps us be able to communicate with our funders as well. So we would definitely appreciate that. We're going to do some introductions, partly by video, and a couple people introduce themselves just by doing introductions. Arzeena, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Arzeena Hamir. My husband Neil and I, we manage Amara Farm, just north of Courtenay on unceded Comox territory. We have been certified organic since 2015 and grow a mix of vegetables. And now, as we're aging, we're moving into some more perennial crops, much more easier on the knees and the back. So when we established especially the perennials, we did underseed with a lot of cover crops in the alleyways. I have to say, initially in the vegetable production side, we relied heavily on tarping as a way of covering the soil and ensuring erosion wasn't an issue for the winter months. But what we're noticing, and I can say this because, some of the reasons behind this was our soil is a fairly heavy soil. It's a loam. And it naturally came with 8 to 10% organic matter. So for us, organic matter was not an issue. Like water holding capacity, we had plenty of. So at cover cropping for biological, for just biomass, was not really part of our reason to cover crop. So we relied on the tarping because easy, and the Comox Valley, just north of us, we have a really readily available supply of secondhand tarps, the UV-resistant tarps. So that's kind of where we went. But, as more reading and understanding, looking at cover crops, we initially started adding them in as a summer cover crop, relying a lot on buckwheat, primarily for weed suppression. And now we are looking at trying to reintroduce cover crops again into the other areas. Huge issue on our farm is wireworm. So I will put that out first. And I think as the panel goes, I'll discuss a little bit more about that later. So just a little background on us.
Hello everyone, my name is Matthew. I am a professional agrologist, not currently farming at the moment, but I have been actively farming for the past 10 years in many different parts of the country, from Nova Scotia to Haida Gwaii. And I've been working with cover crops since my very first season, something that I've seen the benefits of in many different systems. They have lots of different things that are great for the soil. They can play in many different types of scales and farming kinds of priorities, but at the same time, there's quite a few challenges with them. So as talked about wireworm, even getting them established can be quite a challenge sometimes, especially if you have geese around, like where I was farming, that just ate everything as it was coming out of the ground. So there's a lot of room there to have these be such a great tool in everyone's toolkit on the farm, but at the same time, it does take some patience and some just experimentation to really get them dialed in. And I'm looking forward to this conversation today. I think we've got some great people on this panel, and it's going to be really good to hear some more about cover crops with all of you.
I don't want to see that until the spring, not really. This has been a really unusual fall. So, what would be nice would be like this. We'd like to see it here, really thick, no gaps. I would have taken this down, high mowed this, created that thatch. It just is a better cover. That's what I think. That's also what I've been seeing because we had the opportunity to work with this network of other. In addition to this farm, we've got 6 other farms that we work with. Anytime you can get somebody to put a little bit of a set aside and then have to manage the cover crop itself, then we can see these things like what happens when you really cut it down, keep the height low, and you start to build this thatchy sort of layer on top of a seed base, because we want to reduce off-farm nutrients, but if we can also reduce having to purchase the seeds by using established seeds and seeding, we're going to be somewhere else yet again. My name is DeLisa Lewis. We are standing in the fields of Greenfire Farm. We are a family farm, a diversified farm in the Cowichan Valley on Vancouver Island. And we are here today on the traditional, ancestral, and ceded territories of Hulkaminam speaking peoples. So as a settler farmer and uninvited guest in this land on these waters, it is with gratitude and respect that I pay tribute to and acknowledge in very clear terms the importance of the Indigenous knowledge, the Indigenous stewardship, all of that, a foundation for being here and in whatever small way we can to try to learn from and steward these lands as well. This is for cultivated annuals, we would call it post-season. So we're here in just about the middle of November. There's moisture in the soil, there's moisture in the air, and it's great to be here. So I've been farming, beginning with vegetables and fruits, certified organic vegetables and fruits for just about 25 years now. I'm grateful to have been mentored by very experienced land stewards and farmers steeped in the tradition and practices of soil health management. So I have been cover cropping for all of those growing seasons in one way or another. Into this season, I was particularly interested in learning more about species selection for summer or warm season cover crops, and continuing to sort of build on the beginnings of a base of understanding around how to establish cover crops both warm season and over winter without the use of supplemental irrigation water, either without it or with minimal reliance on it. So those things are pretty key. This field is charismatically named F4. We have 4 rotation fields. This is F4. And this field in this year as a rotation was peas and beans, basically our legume field, the entire half acre here. And so for the cover crops, I've been focusing a lot on the timing and establishment. Just across this half acre, there's 4 different establishment dates and a little bit different mix of cover crop species. All of these are overwinter cover crops. And so these are basically just rye and a little bit of vetch, clover, 70 and 30%. So 70% cereals, 30% clovers and vetch. That was planted in mid-September. This was planted in late August. This was planted in mid-August. And so this one has instead of the rye, it has a barley, an overwinter barley. But again, we're focusing a lot on that mix of cereals and clovers. This over here, where you can start to see these flags, is the long-term nutrient management project. It also has, because this is a randomized replicated trial, what look like bare patches. They're the control, so places where we don't want to apply any supplemental nutrients, even including the cover crop. So there's kind of these little squares of emptiness. But this one got in the ground fairly late. What we're looking at here is a much more diverse species mix, so it includes peas, clover, and 2 kinds of cereals in some of the plots, so a 2 species and a 3 species diversified mix. Down the way here, we're looking at a different field, and this was the cucurbit field in terms of our crop rotations. So typically with cucurbits, we use a little bit of plastic culture to hold the moisture in and keep the weeds out. This year I experimented with putting either buckwheat and crimson clover or just crimson clover in the alleys to see how and whether I could manage those alleyways a little bit better than just the modes. This little block of cover was planted, established in second, third week of August, and it's mainly that mix of barley and clovers. And the barley is starting to form seed heads here. I'm really happy with what I'm seeing in terms of the density of the clover in this stand. And always, when we can get a nice, solid, thick block of cover crop at a slope to hold soils, that makes me happy as well. For farmers who are trying to refine or dip their toes in the waters with cover cropping, it's really important to ask what your goals are with cover cropping as you do that cover crop species selection. So get clear, and there are great resources out there. We've got a great cover cropping guide published by the BC Ministry of Ag, and it does a great job of tracking those goals, which could include weed suppression or keeping a cover on the soil and reducing risks of erosion, all those, and the species selection. So that's real important. Find out why you want to grow a cover crop and address it based on what the different species of cover crops can do in that slot and in that window for that purpose.
I'm Ilya, and this is Square Root Farm. Square Root Farm grows a diverse variety of vegetables in Victoria, BC. Cover cropping looks like a whole number of different strategies and things on our farm. We do it for a whole variety of different reasons, and it can range from well-planned, well-executed, precision-seeded cover crop to more of a frantic, we gotta throw something in here to cover the soil before winter. Our cover cropping goals for this season are to increase the insect biodiversity on our farm, which I think we are successful at. And our secondary cover cropping goal is to improve the soil health. So this is one of our overwintering cover crops. This is oats that is taking the place of our carrot field here. This was all carrots and then it became oats. One of our goals for this cover crop here is to soak up any excess nitrogen and to protect the soil from the rain over the winter, because otherwise there'd be nothing covering the soil. And as you can see, there's a lot of weeds coming up amongst the cover crop, which is okay. It's not ideal, but we'll manage that by turning this cover crop over as early as we can in the spring, before the weeds go to seed. Yeah, this is our number one winter enemy, is chickweed. It's very difficult to control just because it really thrives in conditions where you can't hoe and you can't weed and you can't hand weed. It's too wet. It's not worth walking out onto the soil and compacting the soil to deal with it. So we just let it go. We do like to seed it nice and thick, as thickly as we can, as a way to shade out the weeds, because often this type of overwintering cover crop does go in a little bit later than is ideal, because we still have crops out here. And so by seeding it extra thickly, that's a way of sort of compensating for how late they go in by seeding it thicker. The benefits that we've seen from cover crops are pretty wide-ranging. We've really increased the biodiversity of insect and bird species over here on this site. When it was new here, we were newly farming in this field, it was pretty quiet, and now it's buzzing. And from a strictly utility perspective, our summer cover crops are really important to us in managing the soil tilth. The way that our soil works is it goes from very wet and slippery to very hard and very dry, and planting a cover crop in the middle of that transition really helps break down the toughness of the soil. So a crop after a cover crop of buckwheat, for instance, is a lot more easy to manage than transitioning directly from the wet season to the dry season with no cover crop in between. These are our cover crop sunflowers. We seed them as early as we can in the spring and leave them standing. The reason we leave them standing is because, number one, the birds come and they clean off all the seed heads, which is awesome, so we don't have a weed problem, a sunflower weed problem next year. And then also they do provide some cover for the soil, protect the soil from those raindrops. What we're trying to do with broadleaf flower cover crops like marigold and sunflower is have something that's covering the soil over the winter that's also not a huge challenge to turn in the spring for the following year's crop. Because one of the challenges with something like a heavy-duty overwintering cereal cover crop like rye is that it's a big job. It takes a lot of time and equipment to turn over and make the soil ready for a crop in the spring. It pushes the spring crops really quite late often. With something like this, it's a relatively easy matter to just rototill or cultivate this under, and within a couple of weeks, if the soil's dry enough, we can plant something into it. Not the case with an overwintering cereal crop. I guess we've been doing it for a few years now, a sunflower cover crop, and we're gonna do it again. That's the thing with cover crops, is that you can always do it better. And we're still 20 years in learning what our system is and trying to make it better, trying to learn it and figure it out. The way our farm is developing is into a much more of a fall-centric farm. Once we harvest a crop, it's a little bit late to start seeding cover crop in the winter. And so we're trying to find ways to manage that and deal with that. So this is a really late seeded cover crop. This is about as late as we'd normally seed a cover crop. I think it was last week in October. And it's also in one of our wetter areas, I know from experience. And so we did probably about a 50-50 mix with rye and oats. And we mixed the rye in there because we know that it's a lot more hardy and it tolerates wet soil a lot better, germinates in colder, wetter soil. To other farmers just starting with cover cropping, I would say keep it simple, keep it basic, choose one goal that you want to meet with your cover crop plan, and choose a simple cover crop that's cheap and easy to meet that goal. Super easy ones are an overwintering cover crop that's a cereal, wheat or a rye. And another super easy one is a buckwheat cover crop in the summer.
Okay, great, thanks a lot. I don't know if this is working, but can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, I think right now we're just going to jump into questions from the audience. You can speak them out, and I'll try to repeat them if people can't hear. I have a list here if there aren't any, but I think I'll just hand it over, and we'll just start with, does anybody have a question?
Yep, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. So we've got really heavy clay soil, so when it gets wet, it stays wet. And yeah, we've got waterlogging. And our preference is to do cereal cover crops in those areas because even though they are they will be stunted, we can definitely see starting in February is when we start to see the effects of they'll go purplish or yellow. Our other cover crops that aren't so waterlogged are big and green and lush, and these will kind of stay stunted. They're still serving a function, they're still holding the soil in place for us, so it's still worth it, even though they're not healthy. Or they're drowning. They're starving for oxygen. That's why they're not growing. But that's still valuable. And I wouldn't in our rotation overall, in those areas, that area will eventually get summer cover cropping. So we don't need to add a lot of organic matter into our soil, but it is always a benefit with the cover crops. So it's that we don't get a full stand of rye or something like that, or oats in the spring is fine, but eventually that area will get a buckwheat, a summer cover crop, or it'll get a fallow period where we will be incorporating more cover crop into that specific low-lying spot. But the benefit's still there even if it's stunted. But we do try to, what are you gonna do? Yeah.
Well, you work with what you got.
Yeah, exactly.
Do the best you can.
Yeah.
Given your context.
Yeah, but that's the thing. When we first started noticing that, it was oh my God, these look so awful. It's so embarrassing. Seeing these real why are they so sickly? But I mean, that's just it. The soil is what the soil is. Yeah.
Does anybody else on the panel want to speak to cover cropping lake-like fields?
I mean, clearly you could see some lake-like fields in our silt loams, Fairbridge silt loams, and similarly, we have to rely on overwinter cover crops that establish very quickly. So the key is, if we want some kind of hold, even if it's yellow and bent over and not much there, we have to work to beat the timing deadline for us, for those soils that are the worst, the most poorly drained, and also shaded a bit. For us, that cutoff is September the 15th. So in order to that establishment, and I say September 15th, but it depends whether we pump that along with irrigation, if that's needed, but it really needs to get up and get established in order to hold some of the soil if that's the main purpose. The other tools at our disposal, of course, tarping if we need, and that's sort of where we're left to in the sense of that whole farm rotation. Cover cropping is one of the tools, and then there's a whole suite of others that we have to turn to in order to hold the soil structure.
I will say too, just like with the overwintering, like in those waterlogged areas, we don't get as we might have a pretty full stand, but it's pretty stunted. I'm not stressed if the chickweed takes over in those areas, not at all, because to me that's serving a cover crop purpose in those areas, and we'll deal with that to lean that in and turn it over. Might even tarp it to because that it kills pretty nicely with tarp for chickweed, but I mean, I consider sometimes chickweed part of the cover cropping system, especially in those tough areas.
For us, we have some areas that we do as a set aside for a full season or more, yes, but others?
We have both on our farm because we do have perennials. So in the alleyways, we have some established Dutch clover in amongst the grasses that comes back year after year. But I would say in the vegetable side of things, it does tend to lean towards annuals because you are turning over soil to grow a different crop each year. So
our plan, the plan changes, and it's but one of the things that we do try to do is have an area that is okay, this area is our cover crop for the full season. And what that means is we'll plant a cover crop in the spring, and we might end up mowing that, or we might decide actually we want to do 2 cover crops in here. It depends on what we've got going in the following year, because we want to make sure that we have the soils ready for the next year. So it might be we might have overwintered rye in this area, but we'll till it in and reseed it with something else that will winter kill better, so then it'll be ready to come back in production in the spring.
yeah, when we arrived on our farm, we had so much wireworm, potatoes and lettuce were totally out of the question. We were just losing so much. And we actually had some Agriculture Canada researchers come to the farm to do testing because they were researching wireworm, and they estimated we had 1 million wireworm on our property at the time. It was primarily in hay production, so we were slowly taking the fields out of hay. So that's the worst time to have wireworm, and it's become less, not totally gone. So for that specific reason is why we kind of, especially in the first 10 years, didn't really go towards a cereal-based cover crop because they are such an attractant for click beetles. And we primarily did our summer cover cropping with buckwheat because buckwheat has been shown to have a bit of a deterring effect for wireworm. As a vegetable farm, we also grow a lot of brassicas, and probably some of the other veggie growers know this. And so, because one of the fumigating cover crops that can really help repel wireworm is mustard. But for us, it was always it never fit into our rotation, because we also did have an area that had some clubroot in it, and we just wanted to make sure we were not kind of being so it was hard not to be brassica heavy, and so that really limited the choices that we had in terms of what kind of cover crops you can grow. Like, I highly recommend picking up one of these from the ministry table, and then it's like, oh my God, it's this menu of all these cover crops that you can grow. But then you have to look at your own individual farm and say, okay, for us, like, okay, maybe right now the grasses don't work for us. So you can start eliminating maybe the brassicas, so that includes the daikons as well as the mustards. We start sort of eliminating ones, and then you're kind of left with a smaller choice. So yeah, buckwheat worked well for us. Easy to find the seed in the Comox Valley, easy to spread, summertime, and winter killed, or we would, flail mow it down before it set seed. I did really want to pick up on, because I noticed marigolds that you were using as a cover crop. So apart from these, there are other, like, don't limit yourself to just what's in this list, because we've also been experimenting with other varieties from the seed saving that we do. Like, if you've ever done seed saving, some of the seed is always dropped. And we were noticing, for instance, cilantro will come up in the fall and make a really nice cover crop that you can then even sometimes harvest from. And so, sometimes with dill as well. One of the other areas that is a bit of an issue on our farm, we've got greenhouses, like high tunnels, that we were seeing a very high salinity because of our high water table in the winter months. And Claytonia, like miner's lettuce, just establishes really well through the winter months and is a great cover crop in that situation. So have a look and see. This is a great start, but I'm excited to think, I actually have a lot of marigold seed. I'm going to try that. I really like the idea of the sunflowers as well. So yeah, don't limit yourself just to this, but know the limitations of your farm and then choose your cover crops to sort of fit into what that is.
Yeah. I can also add a bit to the wire weed conversation as well. So I was working at the Sandown Center, which is in North Saanich, and it is an old horse racing track that's been turned into a community farm. And I was there for 4 years in the very beginning when the farmers were first coming on the land. That wire weed pressure was intense. I was really hitting a lot of those crops very, very hard. No matter what the crops were, it seemed everything was fair game to those. Cover crops included, I would say. But because that site has some nuances to it, one of them being in the wintertime, super wet, perched water tables, just waterlogged soils. It's very hard to be growing things. Cover crops at that time just kind of go dormant for a little bit of time. But in the summertime, it's like a flipper switched, and all of a sudden you have just such dry soil, almost as hard as this table. It's just like it's two completely different states. And so the cover crops I found, because I was doing some research trials over there, cover crops are quite intense in the very beginning of the season and at the end, but during the dry season, as the soil profile seems to dry down, they just kind of went with it. And as the temperatures get warmer up, they go down a bit lower, and then they come up again more towards the end of the season when the moisture is coming back into that soil. So yeah, the cover crops were affected by that as well. But I think I saw over time at Sandown the wireworms just over time going down because it was no longer sod. And people were using cereal-based cover crops there. There was some wireworm issues, but I don't think it was as much of a problem there just because it gets so dry in the summertime. And the farmers on site are using mostly minimal irrigation or drip irrigation systems that keep the soil a little bit drier as a whole.
Yeah, all of us could probably, the main circumstance is it's too late in the season to actually establish a cover crop, or your rotation for that particular area calls for, this needs to be ready early in the spring, and if I try to get a cover crop started, basically you're looking at the trade-offs from any kind of interventions from tillage to establishment to compaction as a part of trying to do something good like cover cropping, we think we can also come back with a lot of sort of negative unintended consequences, just with the mindset of we're going to make this happen, but sometimes the time and the place is not right for that. So as Arzeena was pointing out, one thing to just touch on is that sometimes we think of cover crops as okay, here's the menu and you need to choose from only this menu, but the practice of crop rotation, the practice of leaving crop residue, or just leaving a stand of your standing crop in the ground, when you're left with what we've often been left with, let's just talk about these extreme rainfall events that make it all of a sudden, if your soil doesn't drain, it's too late. And so you need to we'll just step away and say, okay, this is done as it is. One possible way to get a very late cover crop of a sort in the ground, I saw the Amish, there's traditional farming in North America that just spreading clover that can be established through frost heave. So you can sow clover seed into the snow and there will be something in the spring. So that is the latest I've ever seen that magic happen, but we haven't seen much snow late, have we?
And I'll just add, so we're using targeting primarily for the reasons that DeLisa mentioned, to reduce tillage. And so one of the ways we would use that is if an area was summer cover cropped that we were not going to plant in the fall, so buckwheat primarily, we would mow it and then tarp it and allow that material to just slowly decompose through the late summer or into fall, winter, and then peel it off in the spring and have a pretty easy to prepare area. And then wherever it was late crops. And we were just discussing this, we're noticing on our farm, and the Comox Valley is 3 weeks behind Victoria. We're finding it wetter and wetter in the spring, and everything seems to be getting pushed more and more into the fall. It's getting harder and harder to find that time when the crop can come out and you can quickly establish something that is not grass. But now that our wireworm problems are under control, we are starting to move back into rye again. But that's it is such a challenge now, just to try, if you're really trying to reduce compaction and working of your soil when it's wet, it's so much easier just to put the tarp down.
Yeah, for many years we did, not with crops that you can eat, but we did underseeding of Dutch white clover under kale. And so it would we'd do it, we'd transplant our kale, wait a couple weeks so we could get some weeding in, and then we'd just broadcast some Dutch clover underneath the kale. And that would really take off in the fall and then through the winter, and it would be this gorgeous lush stand of clover. So the purpose of that was weed suppression, but also giving back to the soil over the winter. It was great. We did that in corn sometimes too. But again, it's timing and but it was successful, I thought. Some of the other things that we've done and that we continue to do, so we don't really do that anymore just because we've changed how we cultivate. We transplant our melons 12 feet apart, single line 12 feet apart. And so that's a lot of space in between. Our melons themselves are on mulch, but then we've got this big gap of soil, and we don't want to just spread plastic or mulch over the soil because the melons will vine and they'll eventually they'll reach each other. But we do just do a line of clover just down the center. And so that's we're fitting in cover cropping. It's essentially understoring it, but it's also on a much it's really wide, so you don't really consider it that way, but it is, and we're just getting that in a little place where we can, any little bits and pieces. You can be really creative with it. One thing with under sowing, we with our heavy clay soil, we get a lot of we've got airflow issues and molds and that kind of thing is a real potential problem for us. And so we want to keep as much airflow as possible. So that's something to keep in mind when you're doing understoring, and it really depends, again, on your goals and your soil type and like what sort of plants you're growing. That may or may not be an issue, but that is something that we keep in mind as we're planning how close we're planting things together, and that includes cover crops, yeah. I mean, it depends on the timing. Is it a summer field cover crop? Like you might still have the window. Maybe you didn't get your cover crop in time to do like an oat, you know, in the spring, but buckwheat is 6 weeks. You could get, potentially a buckwheat could fit in that window. And if not, you know, yeah, if it's a fall one, like say we were too late in the fall getting it in, sometimes it's best like to just let the weeds do their thing. And depending on your soil, like we have friends like in Machosen who they can start like working their soil sometimes like as early as like late January. And so they can just let it be weedy. Weeds are growing slowly in the winter anyways, like everything is pretty dormant, so you're not gonna have like a crazy flush yet. But for them, they can like then till it in at the end of January or February when they got that dry patch, and then get their cover crop in, because things like the cover crop's gonna grow really well in the spring and put on all that growth. Like we don't have, on our farm, we don't have that luxury. Like we can't touch our soil. You know, we do use a tractor, we use machines, but we can't do anything with it, like often, like sometimes in some areas, not until June, you know, so that's, you know, so yeah, in that case, like we would probably tarp if it was past our zone, but.
If you want some impact to compaction, the species that's out there and that if you don't have an issue with brassicas in your rotation, so tillage radishes, and there's a multi-species cover crop mix put together by our island's top shelf folks that's called the Shemanis mix. It has that tillage radish in it, and what I like about it is in a small period of time, it establishes something. If you want more benefit to compaction or compaction reduction, you need to leave it there longer. But if you want to see some benefit from covering the soil and roots in the ground, quick growing species would be my go-to. Others, thoughts?
Yeah, I think the radishes are really great as well. I've seen in Ontario, in a place where it gets really cold in the wintertime, just these beautiful pores in the soil that have been left as they just rotted afterwards. They just fracture through, die, rot. They're really helpful for that. But again, issues with, if you have brassicas in your rotation, you can pass along all those issues there. But this book over here, again, a cover cropping guide, has some good indications that you can actually see in here. In the book, it tells you which ones are going to be good for compaction. And you can find someone, see if you can find a seed for it. Often seed is a big issue here on the island. You see all these great cover crops, you have all these things online, but what you can actually do here is often much more limited. So there's a lot of grasses that can be really good for compaction with their roots. They can really start to break up and with their fibrous roots getting down there. But again, not always that available over here.
My understanding with flea beetles is that they'll mostly, like, they'll go on periphery in the bushes, and that's where they're overwintering. So the cover crop isn't really playing like enough of a role in there to be a problem with like flea beetle, my understanding, and the benefits of the cover crop. I mean, like, too, like with some of the cover crops that we choose on our farm, like we choose flowers, like flowers are part of our cover crop rotation. Like even like we've got a whole section that we devote to like celosia and cosmos and like all these things that you wouldn't think of as cover crop, but we call it cover crop because we're not growing them for sale, but we're increasing like our beneficials. And so that's like, you know, as part of that cover crop, the beneficials and other beneficials too, like we do Phacelia, which is showing some research is showing that like the biological activity from Phacelia is like really beneficial for the soil from that cover crop specifically, and other like beneficials that, you know, to help deal with pest issues. Like you can, if pest issues, you want to deal with pest issues, there are cover crops that you can kind of focus on for that. Yeah, but, you know, increasing like pest problems, it's never been like something that I've noticed with all the different types of cover crops we've done. I haven't seen like an increase in aphids or an increase of flea beetle or an increase of whatever. And with wireworm, part of like what in our plan, like we do cereals, but we're not doing like carrots or lettuce after like the cereal cover crop. Like we're in our rotation and our plan, like we're more likely to do a buckwheat kind of thing or a winter kill thing like the marigolds or sunflowers before the things that are more susceptible to the wireworm. Yeah.
Just one thing came to my mind as well. Talking about the sandown site again, there where it gets very wet in the winter and the spring holds onto that moisture. Cover crops are also really good at keeping the moisture on the ground, and so as a result, sometimes the sandown that grows, they are just getting a huge amount of slugs coming through. And from the cover crops, also from the mulches. Some people would use a lot of wood chips and straw. It's great for conserving moisture, but also great for creating habitat for the slugs. Cover crops are not as much as the mulches, but we're also, I think, contributing to some of those slug issues, which were approaching very monumental sizes at times.
The other pest in the cover crop that you could see, at least from the video there, was rust. Some of the cereals can hold that quite well. Bring it in, capture it, and there it is. And it depends on what the rest of your rotations are, what your risks are for that. But yeah, it's potentially a habitat, and so I think one of the key things that's been emphasized is just establishment is really important, but your termination plan is equally important in that piece with rye and letting it become straw-like. When you get too much woody biomass, that is food for many below ground critters, including the wireworm. So.
I was just like on that, like with the rye, that was just reminding me, like it's start simple, absolutely, like get into it, but be creative too, and like don't be afraid of like trying and exploring. Rye is awesome, and it's one that we continue to use because it has that window that other things don't for like late season. But we choose not to do rye at other points in the season because we do have like things like fusarium on our farm, and I have heard that rye is also a vector for that. And so different things to keep in mind, like a cover crop is part of your crop plan. It is a crop. So like, you know, if you do crop rotation, you got to consider it like that, you know, and like with the, like if you're doing a brassica, a radish, like you got to consider that as like, okay, this is a brassica. You're not necessarily following like, okay, now I'm going to do my kale here, for instance, you know. So yeah, it's not, it's part of it. It's part of your farm. Yeah.
I have a fact sheet for you here. Yeah, the nutrient management side. If you're growing a cover crop with the aim to have some value and nutrient contribution, first and foremost, those two different pieces of establishment and termination are key. So finding out, also beginning to use some of the tools for nutrient management planning along with the cover cropping could be part of what you would consider. So yes, taking pre-season soil samples, mid-season, you know, also there's some great, now we have some tools in our own province and we have some tools within our bioregion. Let's talk after, and I'm happy to connect you with some of those as a sort of stepping stone to that pathway to valuing it. But the key is to not, you don't want rye that's 3 feet high if you want some contribution of nitrogen. It's a different strategy. Totally.
Yeah, I can say at Sandown, again, one of the common practices of running growers on site would go with a flail mower on a walk-behind tractor, and they would just mow it down and put a tarp on top of it to minimize the soil disturbance, but still incorporate that residue into the ground. Something I was trying with my research was bringing sheep in to graze my cover crops in my vegetable plots in the late spring, and that was really effective as well. They ate a lot of the cover crop in a pretty short amount of time, and then if you can put a tarp on top of that afterwards, I think that'll be a really good practice. But chickens are also good. There's lots of different ways, many different ways of terminating cover crops with animals, with mowing, with other things that are going to be not as disturbance for the soil. Crimping, another option.
For us too, we also chose species for like if we were able to establish in August time, oats or field peas. On our farm, generally, like probably not this year, but in most years, the temperatures, the winter temperatures would frost kill, and so you would have like biomass on the top of the soil, but it's not living, and so the termination isn't as big of a problem. So you can choose, the slightly more, less cold. Yeah.
I've just been reading more about precision cover crop seeding. I haven't been able to apply that on our farm. I have seen across Vancouver Island farms and elsewhere is that there's variation from any kind of hill slope or difference in soil type in terms of how the soil holds moisture, which means your cover crop stand is going to vary from top to bottom of the field, sometimes more than others, but that precision seeding takes you to the next level of using that input more efficiently, if that's what you're talking about. I think so.
No, that's really interesting. I mean, our farm, like we're just 8 acres, so something like that seems beyond what we would need, but potentially, but like kind of the things like to get into those areas, like we have definitely found that seed to soil really like makes a difference in how well a cover crop's going to be established. So like I can see that working. Exactly. And so like we like the difference between just broadcasting and leaving it, 2 things happen. Like one, like that seed to soil contact, like, and the potential for it drying out if it's whatever, like you're really reducing the potential success of your cover crop without rolling it. But also after like October 15th, little birds, like it's like wild, like how much seed they can scoop up if you haven't done that. Like, simple ways to just like get your cover crop pressed in. Yeah, exactly.
Steal an entire field.
But that's really interesting. Like I can see that being like that tech being really useful, especially on large scale where they're not necessarily like so focused on like super dense stand or whatever, and it's like overall picture is like getting that cover crop in is the most beneficial.
I could see it forestry slopes, that sort of thing in our province where there's topography and all great. Context is everything for that, but so is seed to soil contact, depending.
Yeah, I think you guys alluded to it a little bit, and it came up at the panel last week, but you talked about all the different reasons for cover cropping, insect or nutrients in the soil or just covering the soil. I think you alluded to like soil microbes, and is there much research that you guys know of, or have you found different types of cover crop that might, increase fungal activity as opposed to biologic, but bacterial? Are we in?
I would say I haven't gone that deep.
Yeah.
But that is one of the differences between having a living cover crop and a crop. Right, is having the biological activity in the soil. So I have noticed on those spaces where we do have living cover crops, over winter, versus tarping. Yes, you can get on the soil on that space faster, but I do think there is something to be said about those lower biological activity because there hasn't been food over the winter months, and as an organic grower, when you're then fertilizing with some kind of fertilizer that requires biological activity to break it down, or it's feeding your plants. That's why I am also kind of coming around to trying to get more living things into to overwinter, but I haven't sort of delved into like what species would attract more bacterial versus fungal.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. Just off the top of my head, I haven't thought about that too deeply in terms of the fungal and the bacterial as well, but I'd imagine if you're having cover crops in a more perennial kind of rotation where you're not disturbing the soil as much, and maybe if you have them underneath some trees, like Arzeena was saying with some of her fruit trees, I think just in that whole system as a whole, you'd see the fungal developing more because they are, especially like mycorrhizal fungi, amazing allies in growing food, but also quite sensitive to disruptions. So I think if you're just going to keep those ground less disturbed in a perennial kind of system, you will be seeing more of that showing up.
It's challenging to find often pre-inoculated legumes just at our feed and seed stores, but they do exist, and there are some companies who sell the legumes with that. And if that nutrient piece is an important part, then you will seek to find these.
Just thinking about inoculants as well, I think they can work, but as well, when I think of soil biology, it's super, super complex and very much varying from place to place. And I think the approach I'll be taking as a grower would be more trying to create as beneficial an environment for as many organisms as possible, and then just let them come in as they want to. I think inoculating could be good. I know that people use microbial teas with compost they made themselves with soil from the area. These kinds of things, the compost seeds, these can be really, I think, effective in some ways, but also there's a lot to be said for just trying to use good principles of improving soil health to try and get that soil biologic activity to be more active. Yeah, but takes more time, but yeah.
There was some allusion to easy places to find cover crop and challenges of getting certain things across the border. Do you want to speak to where you source your cover crop from?
Give out my secrets now. I mean, making friends with your seed supply store, because they have more access to places, and if you can like convince them, it's like, hey, I really want to get 50 pounds of Phacelia, it's easier for them to do it than you shipping it into yourself. And two, if you have other like farmer friends that you can get in on it, if you don't need 50 pounds of Phacelia, you can share that out with other people. That's like number one. Even like for sunflowers, I mean, the like birdseed, like sunflowers, the oil, like those will work. Yeah. But also places like West Coast Seeds, like also has some pretty great cover crop seed. What are some other places we get?
We have the benefit with Osborne of having a Canadian-based seed supplier and buyer, and he will help with that cross-border issue.
I thought they're not shipping them this year, though. I think they're not.
I have found that to be difficult over the last couple of years. Even seeing Dave in person, it's more challenging. But we were getting, the 25 kilo bags of all needed without the shipping hassles, and that's no longer the case.
Yeah, same.
With Arzeena's gentle nudge, at least for one of the projects I'm working on, we really focused on sourcing seeds from our island suppliers, just really back to the basic seeds that they can bring in and or will have in stock. And part of it though, it's not just about who you get it from, it's when you get it, so that you have it and are ready to get that window of establishment. That time matters.
Yeah, I can also just say to the seed side of things as well, there's a lot of different companies across Canada, especially and if you go down south into the States, difficult thing at the moment, but there's a lot of companies dedicated to cover crops in Europe as well. But getting things just here from the island, very tricky. Even from BC-based companies can be hard. There's one in the prairies I'm quite interested in called Covers & Co. I think they're kind of a newer company, but they got a lot of different things that are available through their site. Never used them, but I'm quite curious about what they've been doing.
So I don't suppose you're able to source Canadian or BC grown cover crop seed anywhere. Is that anything you guys have looked into or explored?
The seed that I've saved myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I've saved some of my own Phacelia seed. I would say use cilantro, some sunflower as well.
The one place I found is Mum's Sprouting Seeds will send large volumes of seed. We used to source our fava bean. Yeah, MUMM. And they actually have been focusing on purchasing from Canadian growers. But yeah, we used to get fava bean seed in from them. But yeah, it's hard.
It's much easier if you are doing like on a smaller scale too. Like, I mean, there's the like interesting things like Eco Seed Co-op like has some like cool things, and I mean, yeah, there are there are other ways. But if you're looking for like, 50 pounds multiple, it gets a little bit more challenging.
Okay. Let's see. I probably have some more here. I was going to ask about, you said terminating crops with a tarp, and you mow it first. Is there the benefit to mowing? Is it just it's breaking it down faster? Is there any benefit to not mowing it and covering your buckwheat and letting the whole plant?
Just on the plots that I've seen where, our farm has multiple other farm businesses on, and so we did have a grower who just tarped her chard and didn't cover it, right? And I can still see it, right? It's you. So I do think there is benefit of having the weight of the tarp press the material into the soil so that there's better contact between soil organisms and the tarp. But that's just observational. I don't know if anybody else.
Our farm neighbor has had success tarping just full grassy cover crop, and just it's all like this, and that you see it gas up and go down, and yeah. But it's really it's doing something under there. It actually, I've seen it work. It hasn't worked for us, but it's funny how someone so close, systems, certain things can work for them and not for you for whatever magical reason. But yeah, and there's soil after, I think it breaks it down, and it's the timing again is necessary because it has to get that heat, and that helps everything happen under there, and it breaks down. And she lifts it off, and it's all the there might still be grasses and stuff under there, maybe some long pieces, but it's so weakened. She tills it, and it's beautiful. And it's this is heavy clay soil, and it's yeah. So it does work for some people. Yeah.
Okay. How about money? Are there financial considerations for your cover cropping? Are they saving you money, or how do you assess that?
I think I see it it's expensive. But it's it's the over long-term planning, right? I think long-term we're keeping up the soil health, and so creating the potential for better, healthier vegetables, better production and stuff like that. So it's a long-term investment.
Pest control.
Mm-hmm.
A speaker at the island, the Farmer to Farmer yesterday in Southern Vancouver Island, he was saying that his cover crop, he uses a huge mix, up to 15 species at a time, Tristan Banwa out of Lillooet area. And he said for him, he doesn't bother thinking about the costs. It's for him, it's in paying for insurance. It's just something you do every year. It's for the benefit of the system as a whole. Yes, it costs some money. He doesn't mind about that. But there are some financial supports to get cover cropping going. Through the BC ministry, they have some cover crops support for that, just to help with some of that cost sharing.
And that was grazing. That's for animals. Yeah, exactly. That's specific. So just reminding us that it's not just vegetables. Yeah.
And I will also say, for us, cover cropping, especially the summer buckwheat, is for weed management. And, especially in small areas where you can't get a tractor in, otherwise you would be hand weeding. And, the cost of just growing a buckwheat cover crop versus hand weeding that, I think easily the cover crop wins.
It does, it increases resistance, and you're increasing other biology around. It's all this is, yeah, a community is stronger than an individual. And so, yeah.
Ooh,
Good way to end.
Let's end on that note. Thank you for our speaker.